Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the August 1st Friday webinar. Sorry, we've been having a bit of technical difficulties, and we'll be uploading this to YouTube a bit later. We are very excited to have Erick Lacayo from the University of Washington Bothell joining us today. Their session is titled Focusing on Learning, Our Journey from a Programming Model to the Curricular Approach. Before I turn it over to Erick Lacayo, I just wanted to have a few things to mention and a couple of reminders for you. First, I wanted to mention that the NWACUHO mentorship program is an excellent way to gain connections between new professionals and mid or senior level professionals all over the region. You can find the link for that on the YouTube page. I'll be uploading this later. Finally, the NWACUHO social media team is looking for you to show off your training. Tag @NWACUHO or #NWACUHO on any social media platform to show the region your staff training. It's a great way to show off your cool training initiatives and learn what others are doing too. Now for the reminders, please feel free to type any questions into the chat box later once we get this on YouTube, and we will try and find a way to get the questions back to Erick and Katie. Before you log off, after you've watched this, please find the form for the webinar, which you can give us feedback on everything that you enjoyed or any criticism that you would like to deliver. And if you have any topic that you are passionate about and are looking to have a webinar, please let us know through that same form. Thank you all again for coming, and without further delay, I'll turn it over to Erick and Katie.
Well, good morning. My name is Katie Horowitz. I'm the Director of Residential Life and Student Conduct at the University of Washington Bothell. My pronouns are she, her, and hers.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Erick Lacayo, Resident Director for Residential Education. My pronouns are he, him, his. Okay. And so today we're going to talk about, obviously, our journey from the programming model to ACPA's curricular approach. I think it'll be helpful to kind of know our context behind the curricular approach. So I guess I'll start with myself. I've been working with residential curriculum models now for about 4 years. I worked in 3 previous institutions, mostly in Florida. So I'm new to the Northwest. Real cute up here. So I'm happy to be here. But I've worked in curriculum models before, and I was able to bring that over here to University of Bothell. So Katie will talk more about our more specific journeys, how that we put together.
Yeah, so the University of Washington Bothell is a fairly new housing program. We've only had housing on campus for going on 10 years. So when I came to the University of Washington Bothell 8 years ago, the university had just purchased a housing, and they basically said, yes, we want Res Life, do that Res Life thing. So we immediately went with the traditional model, and we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. But pretty early on, we realized that we were really struggling with traditional programming. We have limited programming space. We have old 3-story woody walk-up apartments that we are programming for predominantly first-year students. And we really needed a way to focus our efforts and use our time more efficiently to really focus, again, on student learning. Our traditional community building models were not working. So in 2014, a resident director, Rachel Rodney, and I attended the Institute on the Curricular Approach, and it was really it was earth-shattering for me. It really changed the lens of what I was doing. I'd worked in residential life for years, and the curricular approach really allowed me to see what we do in residential life very differently. We came back from that institute really energized. We spent a year developing a model, and we launched our first model in 2015. And then I am proud to say that Erick came on board and worked on redeveloping our model. And what we'll talk about too is this curricular approach is very much an iterative process. So we're always changing, we're always evaluating, we're always assessing to see how it's going. And we did a relaunch in 2018. And what we're going to show you today is essentially our relaunch. It's something we're very proud of, and we hope that it can inspire others. I do want to give a quick caveat that the curricular approach is owned by ACPA, so Eric and I are certainly not experts in the curricular approach, but we are an expert in our journey and how we use the information we gain from the Institute to really refocus on learning within our business model.
So like any good presentation, we got to provide them learning objectives, right? So as a result of participating in this program, or this program session, you'll be able to identify the programming model and the curricular approaches and the critiques based on your own institution, understand the 10 essential elements and how can they be applied to your program, and identify some curricular approaches that can impact the student experience by utilizing several assessment strategies and some examples that I will provide later that I use throughout the academic year.
So the next few, it's your turn. Supplemental material.
And I'm a big fan of visuals. I'm a big fan of like looking what other students are doing, and that really helped us redevelop our process. And I want to pay it forward. So I'm providing a teeny URL link, as you can see on your screen, and that is a Google Drive that has our UW Bothell 2018-2019 Residential Life Curriculum Guidebook. Right now we're developing the one for next year, and I'll gladly upload that when it's completed. I also have a board sync, that's our student engagement platform that we've been using for Husky Chats, which I go more info about that. I also provided a simple lesson plan and some quick data, and I will present PDFs of this presentation. I do ask that this is for resource use only. Please do not copy or reproduce these materials. It is not because I own it, it's because it's unique to us, and we want to emphasize that this is what works for UW Bothell, and what works for UW Bothell may not work for your particular institution. So always glad to share those details with that.
So the next few slides I'm going to go over is information that we took from the Institute that really helped us provide context for engaging in this work with the curricular approach. And it hopefully will help you explain a little bit about why the curricular approach is so unique and really different to the traditional model. So first off, the curricular approach is really a specific approach to structuring and creating intentional learning. And it starts with the premise that we are all educators, and that might be a mind shift for all of us. In student affairs, we often don't think of ourselves as teachers and as educators, but if you think of yourself as an educator, which we truly are, we see that we are contributing to the learning and not just supporting the learning. It also redirects our goal to focus on student learning, and I think what's so impactful for us and what's helped us see the beauty of this model is that it provides a framework for assessment. And assessment is really critical for us to be able to tell our story, to share with the Student Affairs Division and the larger university the work that we're doing. And when you have priorities and goals and learning outcomes, you have things that you can start assessing. And so that's what's been so helpful on our campus. As I mentioned, we need to ask ourselves, are we supporting or contributing to the learning? And the curricular approach, and Eric and I would argue that we certainly are contributing. We're not just a support function. In the traditional model, we often describe it as like a buffet. So students can opt in and out of programming, but as we know with a buffet, we don't always make the best choices for ourselves. And so the curricular approach really looks at it as a sequence structured learning and not just throwing a bunch of random programs at students to see what sticks. Additionally, in the traditional programming model, the best assessment tool that we really had, and the one that I know I had used for years at multiple institutions, was attendance numbers, right? Success is butts in the seats. So again, the curricular model is really going beyond that. And here you can see the true shift that the curricular approach makes from the traditional model. So in the traditional model, we look at what we do, we then start looking at, okay, then what are students experiencing? And from there, we'll often develop our learning goals. For the curricular approach, it really turns that on its head, and a lot of faculty call this backward course design. So when we start using that language, a lot of faculty are like, oh, I see what you're doing. So we start with the goal, then from there, start looking at what students need to experience to get at those goals, and then that defines the work that we do. Now, this may mean that you need to let go of some programs, and that's when the conversation can get really real, especially for universities that have a lot of tradition. Thankfully, the University of Washington Bothell, as we are going on 30 years old as a campus, we don't have a lot of traditions, and so luckily that was something that we really didn't need to overcome, but that could be something for your campus. I'm not going to go over this in depth, but please feel free to pause your screen to review this table. And you can see this is taken from the article Shifting to Curricular Approaches to Learning Beyond the Classroom. And this really looks at the traditional model versus the curricular model. And the thing I would highlight about this table is it really focuses on professional staff, particularly in our case in the residential curriculum, it's the resident directors, that they are the educational experts. And while students and RAs can definitely give input about what they would like to see, that we really look to the RDs and the training they have and the theory that they're aware of to make good sequence choices for the education and the learning that's happening in the residence halls. So a couple other things to keep in mind, and this also explains why the residential curriculum that you have for 2018-2019, while there are some gaps still in it, is that your curriculum will never be 100%. I think when I heard that, I was like, okay, that's a relief. Because, you know, you think you have to have everything right, you have to have, you know, no, you can launch a curriculum at 40%. So we launched with having done our archaeological dig, which we talked about. We established our priority and our pillars, and that alone really helped shift the work that we're doing. And so it's okay to launch at 40%. Highly recommend that, and you continue building as the years go on. The other thing to think about is really to consider everything. So at the Institute, they talk about a third of what you will do is new, a third you may need to revamp, and a third of it you're just going to need to let go. And that creates time and energy from staff to put back into developing the curriculum if you're letting programs go that really aren't contributing to the learning. And then finally, as I mentioned before, it is a continuous cycle. So we're always designing, implementing, assessing, and then redesigning. And it really is that iterative process.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you all about the 10 essential elements, and we're going to break them up into pieces. That way we can follow along with the sequence learning of the 10 essential elements. So we're going to highlight the first 3, directly connecting to your institutional mission, that archaeological dig, learning outcomes that are derived from defined educational priority, and based on research and developmental theory. It's not our own intuition. Right, so talking about the archaeological dig, we really have to think about like who are our students, right? We're a fairly small campus. We're part of the UW system. We're located in the Seattle area, so we really have to think about where are we, where our students are, and in order to best serve them. So as you see here, majority of our students are first-year students. Majority of our students are first-time college students, right? So how do we serve those students the best? We also have a large, diverse campus population. So we have to really put those things into consideration as we develop our residential curriculum model. So we also have, and also we have to reevaluate who we are as a Res Life program. And as Katie talked about, our housing program opened in 2009. So we're about to be 10 years old. 10 years old. I was a I like to say that because I'm not a get people upset. So we're back in 2009. We are a apartment complex only, which makes us very unique. We do not have suite style. We don't have traditional beds. We're apartments, 300 bed occupancy. We have only 10 resident advisors that I supervise directly myself, and then we have 8 community systems, which is our front desk staff that's supervised by another resident director. And there you can see our small but mighty professional staff. And then as Katie talked about, we started the development in 2014 and we relaunched in 2018.
So the thing about the curricular approach is it really is grounded in theory, and this is part of that. In the archaeological dig, you'll want to start looking at what is the mission of your campus? What are the goals of your campus that are specific to your campus? So and then in turn, what theory makes the most sense? A very popular one within the curricular approach is the learning partnership. So Baxter Magolda, thinking about that tandem bicycle. There are times, and at the very beginning of learning, the educator needs to be in the front with the student riding along back. And then as the student continues to learn, they're then taking the seat and the educator can be in the back helping guide the way. We also look outside of higher ed, which I encourage you to take a look at when it comes to theory. So our curriculum really looks at transformational leadership as some of the founding theory that we use.
And with for the archaeological days, really focusing on that learning partnership, we came up with an educational priority. And pretty much what an educational priority is, what we have to ask ourselves is, what do we want our students to learn when they leave our residence hall? And that was very important to us. So this was draft number 100, and we may get a draft 101 as of yesterday. So, but we decided that through transformational experiences, residents will be challenged as independent thinkers to reflect on their identities, create healthy living environments, and navigate academic resources to prepare them for success in their communities. And we were very intentional about that educational priority because we have to focus again who we serve, who the students that we serve, what can we provide, and we're not putting our bucket too full or too much work for the resident directors.
All right, let's move on to the next three essential elements. So 4, 5, and 6. So 4 is learning outcomes drive development of educational strategies. 5 is that programs may be one type of strategy, but are not the only one. 6, student staff play key roles, but are not the educational experts.
So I think this is my favorite part of like the development of the residential curriculum that we have done in the past 2 years, is really focusing on our learning goals and learning outcomes. And I'm just a big fan of our learning goals, and I want to highlight that our amazing graphic designers that we have on campus design these little logos, Thrive and Connect, which I love. And you also probably see our great student staff. So those were my RAs last year. They were wearing the shirts and with the pillars in the back. And we were really intentional about telling our students that this is what we're doing. These are our 4 pillars, and this is the experience you're going to get living with us. Our Thrive pillar, we're going to talk a little bit more detail about that in a few slides. We just focus on one pillar. Our Thrive really focuses on like our life skills, and you can see our narrative. And the narrative there is really supposed to be like the elevator pitch of that pillar, so others can understand what that is. Our Connect, so Thrive is mostly focusing on like our life skills. Our Connect really focuses on that interpersonal connection with others. And then
the next, so we have 4 pillars. Then the next 2 are Reflect, which we describe as kind of our identity, diversity pillar, and you can read the narrative there. And Achieve, so the academic focus. And this is what really allows us to link and focus on our partnership with academic affairs at our campus. And you can see the front of our shirts. Look at how happy they are wearing our marketing.
And that was post-RA training.
Yeah, they're so energized, they're ready. So we're going to look at Thrive a little bit more directly just to show you what we've developed. And this is actually something new. These learning outcomes are not in the 2018-2019. So we've spent the year really looking at our narrative. We feel good about our pillar and our narrative, but we're looking at learning outcomes. And these can be really challenging to write. Please note this is still in development. And our first round of them, we had sent the learning outcomes to our faculty partner, our faculty stakeholder, that gave us some feedback, and he ripped the learning outcomes apart, which was really great and really good learning for us.
I cried a little bit.
Eric cried, then he picked himself up off the floor and we moved forward. So here are 2 learning outcomes that we are going to focus on. And I do want to note that these are fairly specific. What you see here, so students will be able to evaluate the effects of their habits on their well-being. And then the other one is students will be able to address health and safety issues within their physical living environment. And you'll notice that both of the verbs there are underlined. So those are taken from Bloom's taxonomy. And they really help us kind of define what we're going to focus on and what we're going to start to measure in terms of thriving. Now, obviously, our learning outcomes, and this is where we struggled, our learning outcomes don't address every single thing in the narrative, and that's okay. That was one of the things that we didn't do correctly our first iteration, is we really tried to boil the ocean and put all these different learning outcomes within the pillar. We didn't want to leave anything out, and it's just too much. And instead, if we can focus our energy and do less, but do it really well and focus on the learning, we're going to have better outcomes, and students are going to understand the work that we're doing as well. Oh, the other thing to think about, you've heard the term SMART goal. So learning outcomes should be SMART. And again, we could talk more about this later. If you have more questions at any point, we'll have our contact information at the end, so feel free to email Erick.
So when we started looking into shifting into the curricular approach, we're not just shifting a model. We're not just creating a model. Everything that we do changes. Right? The way that we see our resident directors and the professional staff, the way that we define our student staff, and the changes that we have to make in selecting and training our students. So as you see, we don't see the RAs as educational experts. So we really have to look back at their job descriptions and their job agreements to making sure that we're defining their role intentionally to really work with this residential curriculum model. When it comes to the resident directors, like Katie shared earlier, we're the ones that have the training and knowledge and student development, and we're the ones that are creating these lesson plans. And changes in student staff selection and training, we have to make sure that we hire students that are able to facilitate the learning. Again, we're not expecting them to be the educational experts, but be able to follow some sort of a facilitation guide. And again, that changes the way that we trained our RAs, because now we're shifting them from just creating programs to let's facilitate a presentation. How do you facilitate that, and how do you make sure that your audience is captured in your facilitation? And then we have to also talk about, like, we want to do all these great things, we have all these great learning outcomes, but how exactly are we doing this? And I'm obviously going to share those with you right now. And I think one that I personally love myself, and what works best for us, because we're a partner style, is those Husky chats. That's what we call them. And Husky chats are intentional one-on-one conversation with a resident in their hall or area around a learning outcome. The resident director provides a lesson plan, which will be provided to the resident advisor. So I give my RAs in the beginning of each quarter a lesson plan for the quarter, and some of the common trends and topics that our residents will be going through during that quarter. And then the students will report back to me, the RAs will report back to me, and then I'll be able to have to follow up with the students if I need to. We also do call community-wide programming. Again, programming is one way of doing this work, but again, I'll talk about other ways of doing this. But we still incorporate programming last year. This is facilitated structured activities in the residence hall focused on the pillar. Again, the RAs are not doing the programming. The resident directors are the ones creating the program, and the RAs are facilitating the program. In that way, I'm sure you all have seen passive traditional programming that you do in the residence halls. One thing that we really reflected back in our education strategies are roommate agreements. We took that piece that didn't seem just so transactional into more impactful. Some of our students are, like we said, are first-time in college students, never been to college, with family members that did not attend college as well. So we have to tell our students that this is the first time they're living away from home, and being intentional with the roommate agreements and making sure that the questions we're asking in the roommate agreements create conversation. The next one is community meetings, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. First opening for me, closing for me. Again, we provide lesson plans for that. And then the last one I want to talk about, which is really interesting, is the spontaneous initiatives. And I'll be honest with all of you, that does not work. And that is okay. I think what I was trying to do is kind of meet the RAs halfway, because some of the RAs were not about this process. And you will notice that. They're like, I want a program, I want a pizza party, Eric. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you a pizza party. And in a way, I wanted to be intentional about that. And so I created the spontaneous initiatives. It did not work. Again, refocusing that the resident directors or the professional staff are the ones that are the education experts and not the RA. So we're discontinuing that for next year. Again, because we reassessed and we know that that did not work for us. Anyway.
So Eric, we do have a question from me, wanting to know if you could detail what exactly is a lesson plan.
Yes, I can. They have to go more details on this plan. So we call it lesson plans. Some other folks may call it facilitator guides, but pretty much is what, let's talk about, there's an example on the Google Drive as well if you want to look at that later, but a lesson plan for community meetings, right? So we have the title, the learning outcome that's being met for that particular meeting, and a facilitator guide. So how are you opening your meeting? Obviously introducing yourself. What's the next thing? Collect attendance. So it's really a guide that the RAs will go through step by step, and sometimes a script that they have to say to share information out with residents, right? And in the end of the facilitator guide, they may have an assessment piece, which I'm a big fan of flashcard assessments, and it's pretty much like a start to end of how I want you to facilitate your educational strategy. We also do lesson plans and facilitator guides for the professional staff. So right now I tasked Katie to write a lesson plan for behind closed doors. Katie has done it for a long time. For years. For a very long time, and then which is great, but we also want to make sure that we have that in paper, and there's a facilitator guide. So if something that Katie can't, emergencies happen, or she can't facilitate behind closed doors anymore, we can have our assistant director do it, or one of the resident directors facilitate that. So it's kind of able to pick it up and be able to facilitate. And that's when we focus on training with the RAs to be able to be facilitators. I hope that answers your question, Lee.
All right, so let's look at how these educational strategies apply to our current learning outcomes under the Thrive pillar. So as you can see, we added, this should look very similar. We just added the how are we doing that. And so we've linked back our Husky chats, passive and active programming, as well as our campus partners to evaluating the effects of habits on their well-being. So there's specific learning outcomes now within Husky chats that tie back to this larger pillar. Additionally, so that students are able to address health and safety issues, we do this through passive and active programming, so specifically locking their apartment doors, and we have housing inspections. We also do fire safety pieces, and then looking at really connecting with our campus partners, again, to do this. So really looking at how those strategies tie back to our pillar. For the next 10 elements, or the next 3 elements, the curriculum really represents sequenced learning. Stakeholders are identified and involved, and a plan is developed through a review process that includes feedback, critique, and transparency. So sequenced learning, and this is something we're continuing to develop rubrics and really looking at the sequence for us, but how we think of it in terms of moving in, moving through, and moving out. So for example, when students are moving into housing, we're really focusing on our housing orientation, and we're focusing on our roommate agreement. As students move through, we use other strategies and other topics that are more pertinent to them in that moment. And then as they're moving out, really thinking about what learning they need to have so that they can successfully move out of housing and move on to their other pieces. So as we evaluate the different strategies, really kind of looking in terms of the sequence. Stakeholders are critical. Again, this also really helps you tell your story in residential life. I don't know how many times when we were starting housing on this campus that I had several colleagues who know me well but said, aren't you essentially running an apartment complex? And I didn't like to hear that because it's so much more. And it clearly showed that I wasn't doing a good job of outwardly showing our stakeholders and our campus partners the work that we're doing in residential life. So identifying who those stakeholders are, who are the people that you work with directly or that you need to be working with directly, and sharing the curriculum with them, getting feedback from them. We have developed a really great relationship with one of our faculty members that loves giving feedback. He actually used to be an RD, Dr. Peter Brooks, so shout out to Peter. And he's been so valuable because now he's not only giving us feedback, he is talking to other faculty about the work we're doing. He's connecting us and he's hearing things that are happening within the school that he works in, IAS, which is our interdisciplinary arts and sciences. he's like, hey, that would be a great thing for a residential elective program with you. And so he's starting to help us make connections. And I know for years when I worked in residential life, we've always wanted to make better inroads and better connections with faculty. And I will tell you, the curriculum has been the kind of secret sauce to really make that happen. We're speaking the language of faculty, they understand the form and the framework, and they get really excited and passionate about the learning. And yeah, so it's been fantastic. Additionally, it helps you connect with other areas also within student affairs. And we've, found it just very, very valuable.
Right, and then the last thing I want to talk about is our 10th and final essential element is the assessment is essential for measuring the achievement of learning outcomes and can be used to test effectiveness and efficiency of strategies for program review and accountability. And so I have this cool little graphic because I'm a visual person, but I took this quote from Dr. Paul Gordon Brown. He is one of the folks that really works directly with the residential business. Some of y'all may know who he is. But assessment to me is really about telling your story and talking about what Katie said a little bit earlier, like how do we tell our campus partners exactly what we're doing in residential life. And sometimes we collect so much data, right? And we need to be effective at telling that story. So we need to refocus on student learning and follow that you must develop a culture of assessment. So one thing I do want to say, assessment is not just one person's job. Assessment is everyone in your office job and even the student staff's job. So it is not enough to just collect data, but data needs to be shared and used towards a continuous improvement. Being open and transparent with this data can also help with staff members, partners, and stakeholders engagement. So I have this really cool graphic, right? And so you see that we have the narrative. It's taking your raw data and providing some context and presenting it in a way that others can understand it, which is the visuals, which is charts, graphs, which I'll show you an example in a second. It can help you inform changes in your curriculum and department. It refocuses attention on student learning and the effectiveness of initiatives attempting to promote that learning. And again, like I said, assessment is not just a one-off occurrence of practice, but it's interrogated in the learning of the organization. So I really want to share a quick snippet of our own assessment real briefly. Is trends in our community. So this is we utilized the Husky Chat in fall 2018 as an educational strategy, and as the RAs have these conversations, they select some checkboxes on what they believe the conversation was about, and I also take paragraphs as examples. But we have peer advocacy for self, others, conflict, current events, new experiences, social identity. In that particular quarter, we spoke a lot about current events, and I think that makes perfectly a lot of sense, especially where we are right now at least in United States history for us. That's a big piece of what students are talking about. So I was able to take that information and create some intentional lesson plans with the RAs so they can facilitate and not educate the students on navigating on current events. I also want to talk about some assessment tools that we use. We're an org team school, so that's how we utilize tracking of student progress, and that's where students submit Husky Chats. We also have utilized Callus and Qualtrics because we do a annual honor residence survey, which I'm sure your institution does something similar. And then we started doing exit surveys, which was really interesting to make it's a way of us asking if students really understood the residential curriculum at the end of the academic year. Now, these seem kind of like a lot of survey, a lot of tracking, a lot of it can just be simple, and that's honestly my favorite type of assessment in the moment assessment. Very common, people do evaluation forms at the end. I want to go even more simple than that. I tend to do index cards feedback. I tell my students or the RA, tell me something that you learned. What question do you have? And I'm able to read those index cards and use that as a follow-up piece to continue developing my lesson plans. And we started doing that a lot with our student training feedback, kind of making sure that our students are really understanding what we're trying to teach them. So take advantage of technology that you have in your campus, talk to your campus partners and see how they do assessment. But again, this is what really has helped us continue developing our curriculum and really getting our campus partners, our stakeholders involved and really understanding what we actually do.
I do want to reiterate that very simple question that Eric highlighted, which was, what is one thing you learned? And you can do this through index card feedback. We also use this technique now within our housing orientation program. And honestly, it has helped so much because we have so much information to give them when they first arrive on campus that it really ends up being a 45-minute lecture on all the different policies and rules. I'm sure you probably do something similar at your campus. What we do is we pause kind of at natural points as we change topics. We pause, we ask them to find someone new and share with them one thing they just learned that they didn't know before. And so it gets people active, it gets people talking, and it reinforces the learning they just had because they're now having to analyze what did they just take in and what is the one piece that was new to them. And that has really helped us break up what is a very long lecture. And is it a great example of what the curriculum does, which is trying to find learning moments in the work that has to get done, particularly operations work, which can feel very tedious, and you can think, what is the learning? There can be learning moments that come in and that then can tie back into that curriculum. So I wanted to just, as we kind of start wrapping this up, talk about some of the lessons learned in our original launch and in our redevelopment. So first off, getting buy-in. Now, we honestly did not have an issue on this campus. I know some campuses have talked about the fact that some faculty don't like the term curriculum, which is fine. You can call it a learning model. There's other ways to call it things. Our faculty on this campus were like, thumbs up, this is great. I know what you're talking about. I know what a curriculum is. So that was good. Returning RAs, thumbs down. They were not thrilled. They were like, what? We are not doing the programming that I love. And so that was a little challenging. Our new RAs, totally fine. They bought in. I think it actually made them far more efficient in their work, which I'll talk about shortly. But it can be an issue for returning RAs that were hired thinking they were doing a certain type of job and were re-envisioning the work they're doing. The other big thing we did is we tried to boil the ocean. Start small, start focused. When you take on too much, then you can't do anything, you can't do anything well. And so I think that was where we struggled. We really wanted to do it all, and we were extremely aspirational, and it was a bit overwhelming. So this time around, we really started to kind of cut out pieces that we either don't have capacity to address, or we know that other areas of campus are hitting it. Market it out. So the graphics and having those RAs wear the t-shirts, we have similar t-shirts that we wear, have been huge because people ask us about them. We're getting props from colleagues. It is a really great reminder of our pillars. So our RAs are visual walking reminders of the curriculum that we taught them about. But definitely think about that marketing piece, and that's been the most fun piece to do for me. And this will take time. So it like I said, it's an iterative process. It could take several years. I mean, there's campuses that have been working on this for years and years and years. But again, any little piece that you do can dramatically change the work that you're currently doing. So don't feel like you have to do it all. And honestly, Eric and I only scratched the surface with all the different pieces. Eric and I just sat through, along with our Division of Student Affairs here, a curricular presentation by one of the faculty members from the Institute, Erin Simpson, who is amazing. And even Eric and I were like, we've been to the Institute twice now, and we were still taking notes like, oh, we need to do this, oh, this is a good. So there's always new things to learn. And I think it engages me as a learner, as somebody that's done this work for so many years. I love being able to learn new things and thinking about the work that I'm doing in new ways. So hopefully that's exciting for you. And if that's the case, the curricular approach could be a really great option.
And kind of like add into that what Katie said about it really changed the way I see myself as a resident director. I'm fairly new professional. I'm only 2 years out from graduate school, and I'm really realizing the work that I learned in grad school and really applying it at the year of practice. And I think that's one of my favorite parts as a professional.
And then how it changed the work. So our division is really focusing on telling our story. We have a new Dean of Student Affairs, Dr. Tim Wilson, and he has really challenged us to figure out how do we tell our story to the campus, to the students, to the larger community. And this has really allowed us to do that. We actually have things to say. We have it boiled down so that we can give that elevator speech to people about what we do in residential life. So it demonstrates our plan for learning. It shares what we're doing. It's a language that we all can talk about consistently as residential life. So we're a small staff, but we're on the same page. Like, we know how to talk about these things. It also has really focused the RA energy, which has been extremely helpful. RAs, there's a broad range of skills and talents when it comes to the RAs, and I think this has created a nice foundation so that if they're all kind of hitting these essential educational strategies, it really focuses them on what we know to be effective when it comes to learning. And that, for us, that's been our one-on-one Husky chats. And I think a lot of research is showing that education happens best in that one-on-one mentoring model, that sometimes educational programming isn't really getting at the learning. So Husky chats is where we've chosen to focus it, and focusing the RA's energy on that. It also creates efficiencies within our staff, because we know what to say yes to. We also know what we need to pass on. And we have started doing that. And then it doesn't become personal. We can explain to them the curriculum and why it doesn't fit within our curriculum for this quarter. And Erick has done a really great job planning a quarter ahead. So if somebody comes to us last minute, there's sometimes that we can fit it in if it fits within our model, and there's other times we've had to pass, and that's okay, because it allows Erick to focus his energy on things that, again, we know are effective and that he's not spread so thin. And again, maximizing impact. So it really, I think what's exciting also about this work, and this is like a teaser for like future potential webinars, is this really does go beyond residential life. So the Institute on the Curricular Approach has expanded outside of residential life. At the University of Washington, all 3 campuses are currently engaged with a student conduct curriculum, which is super exciting, and I really enjoyed that. I wear 2 very distinct hats. I'm half Rose Life, half student conduct. So it's really exciting to see this not just in residential life, and a lot of institutions have a division-wide curriculum. So this really can expand out.
All right, and again, if you want to learn more, we really cramped a 2-day institute into
3-day.
A 3-day institute into an hour. So good job to us. But obviously, a lot of things, go more into more depth. All right, so the institute occurs every year. This year it will be in California, October 2019. I won't be there, unfortunately. I won't grace you out with my presence. But Mary Toll will be there, our assistant director. So say hi to her. She likes to meet new people. We also have a Facebook group of residential curriculum and curricular approaches, so feel free to look that up. Twitter, the hashtags, and again, residentialcurriculum.com, which will redirect to some other resources that we use. And again, that's our link, our URL link that I'm more than happy for y'all to look into and ask us any questions about that.
And at any point, feel free to reach out to Erick and I to ask us more questions. We could go on and on about all different things, share with you what we're doing. But I do want to stress the Institute on the Curricular Approach, and we do not get paid for this advertisement, has been phenomenal. And if you can go, I highly recommend it. It is probably one of the best professional development pieces that I've ever done. And it's really phenomenal. So it does fill up fast, though. I would definitely sign up in August. Historically, it does fill up by the beginning of September. So definitely think about it. But if you can't go this year, no worries. But definitely, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah,
and you didn't get to see our beautiful faces. I took an hour to look cute for the camera, but it didn't work. So I'll put a picture on the comments or something.
We'll take a selfie.
We'll take a selfie.
What you don't see right now.
So you can see a beautiful picture. But again, just a little funny comment there. But other than that, all we got. Is there anything else you need?
No, I don't see other questions. But as Chris mentioned, feel free to post questions in the Facebook comments or on YouTube. We'll definitely be checking back in and looking at those. But also, like I said, reach out to us. We also plan to be at the NWACUHO conference, so find us. We'd love to chat. We'd love to meet you all.
Cool. We can help you.
Yes.
So like 20 minutes away, if we could.
All right. I think we're good. Chris, turning it back to you.
For sure. Thank you so much for that presentation. Maybe we'll leave it open just for a minute or so for if there's any other questions. I know the stream is slightly behind us right now, but we'll leave it open for just a sec to see if there's any other questions that roll in. But with that being said, thank you both, Eric and Katie, so much for your excellent and really informative presentation, and for being able to work with us and with all the technical difficulties today. And thank you to all of you who have joined us and followed us from YouTube here to Facebook and have been able to listen in and participate. We really appreciate it. We do plan to post this back to Facebook. If anyone would like to suggest it to a colleague or watch it later, you'll be able to find it there soon. Don't forget to follow the link in the comments to see both the mentorship program and to fill out the First Friday webinar evaluation. And if we're not getting any other questions, yes, please do comment them here later on if you're listening to this later, or on the YouTube page. As Katie and Eric have said, they can check back in later, or it looks like you can email them there as well. But overall, thank you so much for joining us, everyone who has joined us live, and thank you again, Eric and Katie, for your excellent presentation.